So the project that I'm working on now is to enlarge, reproduce 3 sections from a Manet painting, The Girl Behind the Bar, at the Folies Bergère. I'm sure you know the painting. This is it. When they're finished, there will be 3 square paintings, each 28 by 28 inches. The square areas from the painting itself are not necessarily all the same size square. That doesn't present too much of a problem. It's just that I need 3 sets of different measurements to work with, that's all. So the way I've approached this is to I just found online a very large size image of the painting itself, downloaded that, took it into a graphics program, and isolated the 3 areas that I want. I took all of the square images and made them exactly 8 by 8 inches. That allows me to break down, to create a grid on each of those images once they're printed out, into 1-inch squares. Now on the panels, which I've prepared here, 28 by 28, each of these I'll reproduce a second set of 8 by 8 squares, which in this case happen to be 3.5-inch squares. Then I'll reproduce what is in this square, this 1-inch square. I'll reproduce it in this 3.5-inch square up here, so forth and so on, and that's how you grid out or enlarge the entire thing to scale without really getting off. If you're trying to freehand it, you're going to go off. That's just all there is to it. Another way to do it would be to reproduce the image to the exact size and trace it onto your panel with, let's say, with some charcoal on the back of the image, and then trace it on, with a sharp pen or pencil, and that would leave your image on the grid. I prefer to do the grid when I'm working with something detailed. For one thing, if I'm tracing, there are areas I might miss in a highly detailed painting, tracing off. With a grid pattern, it's easy enough to see what you've reproduced and what you haven't. So, I'm in the process now of gridding off this 28 by 28 inch panel for the first section that I'm going to paint. So I've marked this off into 3.5-inch squares. I'm just simply using a pencil, and I'm gridding off directly on the panel. This time, because I'm working in oils, I'll be working in oils, so I'm not worried about these faint lines showing through my medium. If I were working in latex, I might be working so thinly that those lines might show through as a medium, but with oils, I'm really not worried about that. Otherwise, what I would do, and have done many times in the past, is to use push pins along the edge and then create my grid with a heavy-duty thread, like a carpet thread or a buttonhole twist. That way I have a grid on top of my panel that's not violating the surface itself, and it's I still have the grid to work with. And once I'm finished drafting the image up, I can remove that thread and proceed to paint. I used to work in pencil. Eventually gets disguised or covered up or washed away. Charcoal leaves too much residue. You can see my grid done in pencil, 3.5-inch squares. And then I mark them off. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. The panels that I'm using are built from 1x2 poplar. You can see the construction back here. There's bracing in the corners, angle bracing. So it's a 1x2 poplar frame. Mounted to that is an 1/8-inch or 1/4-inch Luan. I then take a 12-ounce canvas and with white glue mount my canvas to the front of the panel. I do not glue the edges. When I do that, I use a burnishing roller to burnish the canvas into the glue. I use a roller, a paint roller, to roll the glue on so I get a very even coat. Then apply the canvas, use a burnishing roller, burnish it in all directions until you have no wrinkles. That's a good advantage of a 12-ounce canvas, is that it has less of a tendency to wrinkle or stretch on you. Plus it has a good heavy tooth, and it's just a resilient canvas. I then, when that's dried, and I give it a good time to dry overnight, so let's say, I'll then do, using an acrylic gesso in this case, I'll again roll with the paint roller, and I use a sponge roller to get as fine a surface as I can, as little texture as I can. I will roll an even coat of gesso on the surface, give that time to dry, sand that with a medium to fine sandpaper, and I'll get a smoothish surface. I'll then gesso again, being sure to dust off what I've sanded first. Gesso again, let it dry, sand it again. Now I could keep doing this over and over until I could achieve like a glassine surface if I wanted to. In fact, that's the way Maxwell Parrish worked. He would gesso and sand, gesso and sand, gesso and sand, until he had a virtual glassine surface to work on. But I want the texture. I like the way it feels when my brush goes across it. I like the way it catches paint. I like the solid surface to work on. I could just as easily have stretched the canvas, but I prefer to have that resistance behind my brush when I'm painting. That's a personal preference. Plus, the mounting of the Luan to the frame gives the finished panel less opportunity to torque or twist or bow in a wet medium. So, this is how I'm beginning.